welcome back to Miss Annette's Little Farm in the Big City. Today we're going to talk about worms. You can't really talk about worms unless you have some. I'm going to go ahead and do some digging that I've been wanting to do, and let's see if we can find some worms so that we can talk about them. I've been wanting to add some bricks to this path that leads to the teepee, so I just didn't feel like I had enough bricks, so I'm going to move some of this grass out of the way and dig for some worms. Let's see if we can find, if I were a worm, this is where I would want to live. Let's see what we see. See the worm in his little wormhole? Open a roly-poly. Let's go ahead and break this open. Let's dig for some more. As I'm digging, I can see all these little tunnels when I point them out where the worms are digging through. Look at that. See these little holes in the soil? Those are from the worms tunneling through the soil. Whoops, there's another worm. That's a little tiny baby one. Digging for worms, I found this little tiny worm all curled up in her little home. Look how little she is. And she was curled up right in there. Now that we dug up some worms, let's go ahead and make a place for them to stay. Let's go make a worm bin. I have a lot of materials here to make our worm box, and I wanted to show them to you. I have some soil that I dug up when I was digging for worms. I have some worms. I have some newspaper. I have a spray bottle with water in it, and I have a container, and a container that you cannot see through. Now I got this at the thrift store, and it had a lid on it. You can get a container like this anywhere, or even one smaller or bigger. I have some food leftovers. I have some banana peels, some eggshells, some coffee grinds, and some vegetables left over from dinner. So I'm going to grind those all up later in the blender. But I wanted to show you all the materials that we need to make our worm box. I'm going to go ahead and put my little mixture of food for the worms in my blender, in my Ninja blender. And I'm going to hit it on crush so it'll mix it all up really good. It'll be kind of gross. Coffee grounds, banana peels, all that good stuff. Start with our newspaper. And the first thing is we're going to be tearing it into strips. I got this newspaper at the library because I don't subscribe to any newspapers. But if you have any newspapers around your house, you can save them, or you can get some at the local library, or you can ask your neighbor for the Sunday paper. I'm at the library all the time anyway, so I just picked up some of these at the library. It's kind of fun to tear this paper up. I don't know how much we're going to need, so I'm going to do a lot. I have my bin here for the worm bin. I don't need my lid right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this spray bottle to wet the newspaper. I'm going to get it nice and wet. This is kind of fun too. Alright, I have it nice and wet. So I'm going to put a layer on the bottom of my bin. And it doesn't have to be really a thick layer, but just a layer of the damp newspaper at the bottom. The newspaper provides food for the worms and helps keep the soil moist to make them a nice, comfortable habitat. Now I'm going to get my dirt here, make sure it's nice and crumbly, and I'm going to put a layer of dirt, and then I'm just going to keep on doing that. I'm going to put a layer of dirt, and then a layer of newspapers, a layer of dirt, and a layer of newspapers, until I get it to about here. It said 3/4 full, so if 3/4 means a quarter means 4, 3/4, 1, 2, 3. So to about this line right here. We have all the layers in, and it's important to have it nice and moist. I read a lot of different articles on how to make a worm bin, and there are a lot of different ways that you can do it, So you don't need to have a bin exactly like this. You can use a jar, you can use a smaller bin, you can use a bin that you can see through so you can watch the worms. You can look online. I'll add the link to the instructions that I used to make this worm bin. Well, we're ready for the worms. And all we have to do is put them in here. See that little ring right there on the worm? He's wiggly now. Right there? That shows that he's an adult. So you can see how it's moving right now. That means that's its head. It's hard to tell, isn't it? Unless you look really, really close. That this would be the bottom of the worm here. And this will be the front, or his head. He doesn't have any eyes, but I can feel little bristles to help it move. And I can feel those on my skin. Worms don't have any eyes, but they rely on vibrations. So when they come up out of their ground, out of their little house, and they feel a vibration, they run right back in because they think it might be a bird or a chicken, a fox, a mole, all kinds of predators for little tiny worms. The worms are covered with mucus so that they can slide in their holes easily when they're underground. And you see how quickly the worms went into the ground here? We have just a few that haven't gone down there yet, and the one I have in my hand. Worms have 5 hearts, and they're right about in here on a worm. 5 hearts. Isn't that something? They must be very loving and kind to have so many hearts. See? I don't think we can see the bristles. When worms get cold, they go way deep down into the ground and snuggle with all the other worms, which is kind of funny, isn't it? When it gets dry outside, they go down deep too. So when it's cold and when it's dry, they like to go down deep where it's cool, but the temperature is about the same. Now some people think if you snap a worm in half, it'll grow the other half back, but that's not true. The only thing that will grow back on a worm is its tail. So if you break its tail off, it will grow back. But if you snap it in half or break it in any other kind of pieces, it will die. The skin is really important to a worm. That's how it breathes, and that's how it gets through the soil. It has a mucus covering, so it gets through the soil very easily. This little worm has about had it with me. I'm going to go put him in the container. Now all the worms have crawled down. So now I'm going to put one more layer of newspaper, and then I'm going to put some food for them on top. I'm going to drill some holes on the lid, and then I'm going to take it downstairs, down to the basement where it's nice and cool and dark, and leave it down there. And in a couple days I'll come and check and make sure they're doing okay. Here comes the food. I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit on the top. So I don't want too much on there. Because if they don't eat it, then it'll spoil. And we don't want that to happen. And spreading it out. There we go. Then they'll come up and eat it when they're ready, when they get acclimated to their new home. Well, I hope you had as much fun as I did learning about worms this week. So much to know about worms that I never even knew. I think I'm still a little bit surprised that foxes eat worms, and that worms have 5 hearts, and they have little nubby legs to help them get around, and then go forward and backward. All kinds of stuff we learned about worms this week. I'm glad you came along. And I hope that you get to try making a worm bin at home with your family. Thank you for visiting Miss Annette's Little Farm in the Big City. Make sure you get outside today, and we'll see you next time. Bye!
Ba-ba-da-ba-ba.